We have to adhere to our schedule, otherwise some very bad things will happen. Um, it's my great pleasure to introduce our luncheon speaker, Senator Ifigenia Martínez. I have known her and her son, Alfredo Navarrete, for about 35 years. He and Patricia Armendariz, also over there, who spoke this morning, um, are both former students of mine and both great friends of the center. Senator Ifigenia, in a long and distinguished career, has been a prominent practicing economist in Mexico and an influential figure in Mexican academia. Now she is in her second term as a senator in the Mexican legislature. She got her BA in political economy from UNAM and her master's degree in economics from Harvard. Then she started working both at the Ministry of Finance, designing a new tax system, and at UNAM, where she taught public finance after winning the Banamex National Prize in Economics for her seminal work on income distribution. In 1966, she was appointed head of the economics department at UNAM, and later that year she was made Woman of the Year for her distinguished service to the sciences and to her country and her academic contributions to UNAM. In 1968, as head of the economics department, she participated in the student movement defending the autonomy of the Mexican University. From 1970 till 1976, she held various positions in the Ministry of Finance and the National Fund for Rural Development. In 1976, she was elected congressman for the first time. In 1981, she served as deputy Mexican ambassador to the United Nations. Then, remarkably, in 1987-88, she founded the Partido de la Revolución Democrática and was elected for the first time Senator of the Republic from the opposition party. In 2012, she was again elected as a congresswoman, and in 2018, again as senator from the Movimiento de Renovación Nacional. Throughout this long span, Senator Martinez has been a prolific writer on income distribution, agricultural studies, political economy, and public finance. It gives me great pleasure to call on Senator Martinez to speak to us at this luncheon.
Good afternoon to all of you. Dear colleagues, first I would like to thank the director of this center, Dr. Edmund Phelps, for the honor that has been conferred to me by participating on this forum and especially in this session as a luncheon speaker. It is unaccustomed in Mexico, but I know that it is a very significant distinction in the United States, especially because of the amount of time one is given to research on a subject and for the opportunity to generate a dialogue with the attendees. I have prepared an intervention divided in two brief parts, each one of them strategically selected for our conversation, which I hope will allow us to address synthetically but substantially the main issues that concern our meeting. The subjects are First, women struggle for economic, political, and social inclusion. And two, the pending challenges for gender equality. Understanding that the government is an instrument of mechanism of power that conducts public life and determines the place that societies, families, and individuals occupy within it, the first participation of women in public life were the vindication of their political rights, especially the right to vote and participate in the selection of governors. Since the late 18th century, during the French Revolution, women's rights of equality of rights between the sexes began to be vindicated, although the protagonists of this revolution denounced that this struggle was fruitless and that freedom, equality, and fraternity only referred to men and not to women. In the 19th century and in the first decades of the 20th century, women's struggles was limited by several restrictions and impediments that reduced their cultural, political, working, social, and personal horizons. Their social condition was characterized by political and education inequality, subordination based on legal discrimination, occupational segregation, and open discrimination in the work environment, which unfortunately, which still continues and fortunately is diminishing. The suffragettes of the late 19th century obtained women's right to vote and that led to what is known as feminism in the 20th century. Their objective included gender equality in all areas. Women's suffrage has been approved and unapproved several times in different countries of the world. In the United States or Sweden, female suffrage was authorized even before universal suffrage. Thus, while this right was granted for European men and women, it remained forbidden for people in other countries. Nonetheless, in most cases, suffrage led to women's suffrage led to universal suffrage. Although women have fought for the right to vote since the 19th century, the real struggle did not take place until the beginning of the 20th century. In 1912, the Progressive Party, led by Theodore Roosevelt, became the first national party to recognize women's right to vote. After obtaining the right to vote in 1920, women in the United States began a new struggle for their rights to be heard in politics, a cause which they gained some triumphs, occupying positions that were previously reserved only for men. This struggle also included the pursuit of equal working opportunities, better working conditions, and higher salaries for all jobs. So we can say that women's participation in politics is relatively recent in modern history. The most significant was found in 1966 with the triumph of Indira Gandhi as Prime Minister of India, whom later became the main political leader of the Third World, of the so-called Third World. Not too many women have been able to occupy important political posts, such as Prime Minister or Secretaries of State. Among the best known internationally, we could mention Margaret Thatcher, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Isabel Perón, former President of Argentina, Michelle Bachelet, former President of Chile, Condoleezza Rice, former Secretary of State in the United States, Christine Lagarde, Managing Director and Chairwoman of the International Monetary Fund, Theresa May, current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and Angela Merkel, Germany's Prime Minister, among others. When we talk about this issue, It is generally thought that women's participation in politics is higher in developed countries, but it is not. This does not depend on wealth or poverty. In Mexico, gender equity is going through a decisive moment of transformation due to measures instrumented by our present government. 50% of the parliamentary seats are occupied by women. This parity also applies to the current president's cabinet. The incorporation of women into paid labor, an area traditionally occupied by males, occurs for the very first time during First World War, and accentuates during World War II because of the participation of male workforce in both wars. This situation, along with other parallel phenomena such as higher education, public demand for equality, procreation control, and dissemination of contraceptive methods, the demographic frame of theories known as demographic transition, first and second, and reproductive revolution derived in an inverse correlation between the increase of life expectancy during the 20th century and a fall in the world's natality rate as income increases. There is a strong correlation between the incorporation of women into organized paid work and a fall in the birth rate. The same way there is a correlation between the incorporation of women into the salaried world and the increase in sales of electrodomestic appliances that facilitate traditional domestic chores. In parallel with the changes in the social environment that have favored the incorporation of women into the working world, paid work, there has been also an important evolution in their qualifications motivated by the following aspects: a massive access into higher education, the increase of professional skills through specialization, a permanent educational formation, in the increase of experience derived from a higher percentage of women in the working world, as best as also a better management of fertility control. However, according to the United Nations, the absence of legislation in the matter affects both economics and women's development in all regions. More than 2.7 million women are restricted to perform in the same choices as men in 140 out of 189 evaluated economies, and in many countries, women are still inhibited from doing specific works. Also, the rate of participation of female workers between the ages of 25 and 54 is 63% in comparison with 94% of males. And when we incorporate young people into the equation, women's rate goes down to 48.5%, 25 percentage points lower than men. In 2017, global unemployment rates for men and women were 5.5 and 6.2% respectively. In third world countries, women surpass men by 4.6 percentage points in terms of informal unemployment. Women tend to develop about 2.5 times more to unpaid jobs and domestic chores than men. Worldwide, almost 40% of women are employed and yet have no access to social protection. Regarding the digital breach, there are 4 billion people without access to technology, and the majority of them are found in rural areas, have less income, less education, and tend to be women and girls. According to recent microeconomic analysis carried out by the International Monetary Fund, it is confirmed that women provide different skill sets and perspectives the result beneficial for work. The financial performance of companies improves as these maintain gender parity and balance. It is likely to infer that male salaries will also increase as a consequence of higher involvement of women in the working force coupled with an increase in productivity. A research conducted in Canada, Latin America, the United States, and the United Kingdom found out that companies that reach 25% or higher in terms of gender equality or racial and ethnic diversity have higher financial returns than their average domestic industry. In other words, accepting and integrating diversity along with generating equity measures means more profits, more income, more social satisfaction, and more welfare to all society. The recent changes in the world's economy translate into the internationalization of capital and work through process of openness, globalization, and regional integration. Our modern day and our worldwide capitalist economy can be consistent with a common pursuit of values irrespective of initial beliefs. But there certainly cannot be so if inequity and poverty persist and continue to accentuate. We have to work for different futures, but we must adequate theories to our stubborn realities and not the other way around, in order to transform them into benefits for all women and men that can be accomplished in our era of technical and cultural progress. The evident inability of our governments to neutralize poverty, unemployment, and inequality, both in our regions and in our world, made it clear that it is essential to modify macroeconomic policies and that it is essential to have meetings and joining ourselves like today in such a pleasant atmosphere here in New York, for which I am very grateful to have been invited and very grateful to have had the opportunity to speak in a few words of peace and concord and happiness to all of you for being here together. Thank you very much.